All right, so we're diving into something pretty wild today, something with a bit of a bite to it.
Going deep on barbarians.
Specifically, we're tackling something that trips up a lot of players' barbarian alignments.
Ah, yes. The classic struggle. Are they a force of nature or just, well, chaotic?
Exactly, because, you've got this character who's all about primal rage and untamed fury.
Right, right.
But then D&D throws that whole spectrum at you, lawful, good, chaotic, evil, everything in between.
And it's tempting to just slap on that chaotic label and call it a day, but where's the fun in that?
Right. There's got to be more to it than that. I mean, look, we've all seen those barbarian stereotypes.
Oh, tell me about it. The ones who just want to smash everything in sight. No nuance, no depth.
Yeah. But the thing is, there's so many different ways to play a barbarian. It all comes down to what drives them, what fuels that inner fire, and that's where alignment comes in. It's like the why behind the rage,
Absolutely. A lawful good barbarian is going to rage for totally different reasons than, say, a chaotic neutral one.
Yeah. Okay, so give me an example. How would those two barbarians with their different alignments actually act differently in the game?
All right, picture this. The party's in the thick of battle. It's a chaotic mess. Enemies everywhere.
Classic D&D scenario.
Right. Now, the lawful good barbarian, they might be channeling their rage to protect the innocent, to right a wrong. There's a purpose behind their fury. But that chaotic neutral barbarian, they might just be reveling in the chaos of it all, enjoying the thrill of the fight.
So their alignment, it's like the filter through which they see the world and react to everything.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting for role-playing. You're not just deciding if they're good or bad. You're defining their entire worldview.
And the article we're looking at, Find Your Path, 5e Barbarian Alignment Guide, it actually talks about how you don't see a lot of lawful good barbarians, which, I don't know, I find kind of surprising.
It's definitely a less common combination, but that doesn't make it any less valid. In fact, I think it has the potential to be even more interesting.
Yeah, like a noble savage type. Fiercely protective of their people, but still bound by this strict code of honor.
There you go. See, you're already thinking outside the box. Imagine that. A barbarian who struggles to control their rage, who refuses to strike down an unarmed opponent even when their blood is boiling.
Oh, man, that internal conflict, that's the good stuff. That's what makes a character compelling.
Right. It challenges those assumptions we have about barbarians and opens up all sorts of possibilities for role-playing, which is really what we're all here for, right?
Absolutely. Speaking of challenging assumptions, the article mentions a few scenarios to illustrate how different barbarian alignments might play out in a game, and some of them are pretty wild.
Oh, yeah, they definitely got me thinking. Like, one of them talks about a party that's come up with this really intricate plan. They've got every detail mapped out, every move strategized.
Oh, I know that feeling, the meticulous planning session before everything inevitably goes off the rails.
Exactly. So they've got their plan, and then boom, they throw a chaotic neutral barbarian into the mix.
And this is where it gets good.
Oh, yeah. This barbarian, they're not about to follow some predetermined plan. They're all about instinct, about charging headfirst into the fray. Forget flanking maneuvers and tactical retreats.
I can see that leading to some interesting party dynamics, to say the least. But it makes perfect sense for their alignment, right? It's not about being disruptive for the sake of it. It's about staying true to that chaotic nature.
Exactly. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, they've got this example of a neutral evil barbarian, which those can be tricky to play well, but man, when they're done right.
Oh, so much fun and potentially disastrous for the party.
Right. Because this barbarian, they're all about personal gain, about getting ahead no matter the cost. So are they really going to hesitate to betray their allies if it means getting what they want?
Okay, now that's where things get really interesting. It makes you think about how your own barbarian would act in those situations, Would they be the loyal comrade, the reliable tank, or would they be the wild card that keeps everyone on their toes?
And that's the beauty of it, because alignment, it's not just a label you slap on your character sheet. It's a tool. It's a way to define their motivations, to influence their decisions, and to really bring them to life in the game.
It's like their alignment is the story behind their actions. It's not just, oh, they're chaotic, so they smash things. It's more like, why are they smashing those things? And that's where it gets interesting.
Exactly. Because actions without motivation, those are just dice rolls.
Yeah.
But when you add alignment into the mix, suddenly you've got a character with depth, with purpose.
Okay, and speaking of adding things into the mix, we got to talk about multiclassing. Now, for those who haven't ventured down that rabbit hole yet, multiclassing basically means your barbarian picks up a second class along the way.
It's like they're adding a whole new layer to their repertoire of skills and abilities, which can be amazing for role-playing.
Right. So you could have a barbarian who dabbles in a bit of magic, maybe picks up a level or two of wizard or cleric.
Or maybe they lean into their stealth and cunning, dipping into the rogue class.
Ooh, a barbarian rogue. That's a fun one. Lots of potential for some underhanded tactics there. But no matter what class they choose, it's going to have an impact on their alignment.
Oh, absolutely. It can create this really fascinating internal struggle, especially when those multi-class choices seem to clash with their original alignment. The article gives this really interesting example of a barbarian who decides to multi-class as a paladin.
Okay, so we're talking about a class that's all about divine magic, strict oaths of justice, and righteousness.
Yeah, and they're trying to reconcile that with their inherent barbarian rage. It's like, talk about a recipe for internal conflict.
Right, because on the one hand, you've got this instinct to smash first and ask questions later. And on the other hand, you've got this oath binding you to a higher code of conduct. How do you balance those two?
It's a tough question. Does it make them question their actions? Do they try to find a middle ground, a way to channel their rage into something more righteous? Or do they just lean into the chaos and let the paladin stuff fall by the wayside?
Oh man, so many possibilities. And that's what makes multiclassing so much fun. It's like you're adding this whole other dimension to your character's personality, their motivations, even their alignment.
Exactly. And speaking of unexpected combinations, the article mentions this really intriguing example. A lawful neutral barbarian paladin.
Wait, hold on. Did you just say lawful barbarian? I thought those two words didn't go together.
It's definitely not the most common combination.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so interesting. It makes you wonder what kind of backstory could possibly lead to such a unique character.
Right. Like what kind of life experiences would turn someone into both a disciplined warrior of the light and a raging engine of destruction? That's a story waiting to be told.
Absolutely. It could be that their barbarian rage is something they've learned to control, to channel through their paladin training, Or maybe it's a constant battle, this internal tug of war between their oaths and their instincts. Either way, it's a goldmine for storytelling.
And that's what we're really talking about here, right? Alignment isn't just some abstract game mechanic. It's not just a box you check on your character sheet. It's the heart of your barbarian's story. It's what drives their actions, what defines their relationships with other characters. It's basically their moral compass, even if it's a little bit wonky sometimes.
Exactly. And sometimes the most compelling stories, the ones that really stick with you, they come from those moments when a character's alignment is challenged, maybe even forced to change.
You mean like a character actually shifting their alignment over the course of a campaign?
It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's usually a pretty big deal. Think about it. You've got this character, maybe they're chaotic evil, and they've spent their whole life embracing that darkness. And then something happens. Some life-altering event makes them question everything they thought they knew.
Whoa, that's some heavy stuff. What kind of event could trigger such a drastic change?
It could be anything, really. A near-death experience, profound act of sacrifice, maybe even just meeting the right person at the right time. The point is, something shakes them to their core and forces them to confront their own beliefs, their own morality.
Wow. So their alignment isn't static. It can actually evolve alongside them as they grow and change as characters. That's a pretty powerful concept. It's like watching them wrestle with their own internal demons, trying to reconcile who they are with who they want to be.
It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And that journey is way more interesting than just sticking a pin on a predetermined alignment chart.
Totally. And, speaking of interesting journeys, this article we've been talking about, it makes this point about freedom within alignment. And I thought that was really cool.
Oh, yeah. It's something I wanted to circle back to, too, because it's easy to get caught up in the rules and the labels and forget that this is all about having fun and being creative.
Exactly. It's a framework, sure, but it shouldn't feel like a cage. Like, you don't want players to feel trapped by their alignment or think there's only one right way to play it.
Definitely not. If anything, your alignment should open up more possibilities, give you more to work with when you're developing your character.
Right, and they actually give this great example in the article. Remember that chaotic good barbarian bard we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. The blend of primal rage and musical mayhem. Always a good time.
Okay, but seriously, what kind of songs do you think a barbarian bard even plays? Like, are we talking heavy metal anthems about smashing stuff or something a little more, I don't know, folksy?
That's a really good question, and I think that's the beauty of this multiclass. There's so much room to play around with it. Do they use their music to inspire hope, maybe tell stories of epic battles and heroic deeds? Or Do they use it to challenge injustice, to rally the downtrodden with songs of rebellion?
I mean, either way, you know they're going to draw a crowd. But you know what I'm really curious about? Their weapon. Because we always talk about how barbarians are these masters of weapons, right? So what happens when you mix that with a bard's love of music?
Now you're getting to the good stuff. Because, yeah, we don't usually picture a barbarian bard serenading their enemies with a lute or a harp, do we?
No, not really.
So what's their weapon of choice? What embodies both their chaotic nature and their drive to use their, well, let's call it their unique skill set for good?
Okay, now I'm stumped. I'm so used to picturing barbarians with axes and swords and, maybe a giant maul if they're feeling fancy.
Yeah, gotta love a good maul.
Right. But a barbarian bard, what's their version of a battle axe? It's like their instrument of destruction is also their instrument of music. I don't even know where to start.
And you know what? I'm going to leave that question with you and with our listeners because that's where the real magic happens. When you start thinking outside the box, challenging those preconceived notions about classes and alignments.
It's like a challenge for everyone listening. What would a chaotic, good barbarian bard use as their signature weapon/instrument? I know I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. But unfortunately, we are just about out of time for today's deep dive. Any final thoughts on barbarian alignments before we wrap things up? Anything you really want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway, the one thing I hope everyone remembers, is this. Don't be afraid to play with the unexpected. Embrace the contradictions. Because those contradictions, those moments where a character defies expectations, those are the things that make D&D so much fun.
Exactly. It's those surprises, those moments that make you go, whoa, I didn't see that coming, that really stick with you.
Absolutely. So think about that lawful good barbarian, of holding their code in a world that seems determined to break them. Explore the struggles of that chaotic neutral barbarian who's suddenly forced to confront their own conscience. Because those are the stories that will stay with you long after the dice have been rolled and the game is over.
It's about finding those little sparks of humanity, even in the most unexpected places. And I think that's a good lesson for both D&D and life in general.
Well said. Alignment at its core, it's all about exploring what it means to be a person, flaws and all. And who better to embody that than a barbarian?
Right. Because there's so much more to them than just rage and destruction. There's a whole world of complexity hidden beneath the surface, just waiting to be explored.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening, go out there and explore those complexities. Challenge yourselves, surprise yourselves, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the wild world of barbarian alignments. It's been an absolute blast.
My pleasure. Until next time, may your rage be epic, your choices be bold, and your stories be legendary.